Today, I'm delighted to welcome Richard Kirk, Chief Strategy Officer at EssenceMediacom UK. With 17 years' experience working in media and strategy for big names including Amazon, Zenith, and now EssenceMediacom, Richard joins me to chat about why he believes marketeers have shifted so far into digital-heavy campaigns, the increasing need for media quality currency, and why simplicity is key to building a business case. Welcome, Richard. Great to see you again.
Great to see you. Always nice to see you, Ian.
I don't get many people often saying that. but thank you very much for coming along. It's superb to have you here. I mean, and us as well, because we've got an absolutely fantastic topic. But before actually we start on that, normally what sort of say with people is just go through their background, sort of how you got into the industry, etc. So...
Yeah, no worries. Well, yeah, I mean, this could go on for ages because I could talk about media all day. But my background is, I think for someone who's in a media planning role, my background's a bit weird. So I spent a lot of the early part of my working life working in SEO. Mm-hmm. So I was like a channel specialist in SEO right around the sort of 2007 to 2012 period. That was when I was working in that channel, and it was the sort of time when the channel was really like taking off and it was getting onto the attention of big brands, big multinational brands, and holding company agencies were starting to see it as a really big growth channel. So I was very much like right place, right time, basically. Just a bit of blind luck really to start my career, which was sort of where I came from. But then I just got really interested in the idea that there was much more to advertising than any single channel. And I could see that over time, being in SEO was going to get harder and harder and harder because Google was getting smarter and smarter at spotting how people were essentially gaming the algorithm. Okay. And so my sort of long-term view was that the harder that gets, the sort of lower the ROI is going to be on that activity, unless it's going to become much difficult. And it was commodifying quite quickly. So I became a much more generalist media planner, and I've stayed with that ever since. So I just found it fascinating. So I worked at Zenith for a while, doing that in international accounts, working on things like Toyota, Reckitt Benckiser, Electrolux, and some white goods brands. Then moved to the UK for a little while, again at Zenith, worked on Toyota and Lexus for a while. And then I had a stint at Amazon, so I went sell side, Amazon advertising when it was in its real sort of like early rocket ship phase of growth. Absolutely fascinating to work at Amazon for 3 years. Honestly, just an incredible company with an incredible culture. And then I moved back into agency side because, what I will say about being on the sell side is I kind of, there's only ever one answer to every question. And I missed the sort of the sort of balancing across all of it and looking across all of it. So I went back agency side, had a really successful 4-year spell back at Zenith. And then for the last 2 years I've been at EssenceMediacom, leading their planning and strategy teams alongside my sort of co-CSO, Jeff de Burker. It's been brilliant. Okay. So that's me.
God, that's fantastic. Well, now we've had that diversion, I want to ask you about what you're seeing at the moment in terms of the advertising market and the dynamics and the drivers there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely true that budgets are still under pressure. I think that if you look at tracking of advertising budgets as a percentage of marketing budget, they are trending flat, maybe slightly down over the sort of over the last few quarters. There's definite demand for squeezing, very hard at the moment because I think that maybe the start of this year, companies were maybe slightly more optimistic about where they were going to get to by the end of the Q4 than they perhaps will do. So that's what I'm seeing in terms of like investment right now. But generally speaking, if you zoom out a little bit from like is revenue up or down this quarter in terms of the industry, I think if you zoom out a little bit, I think the big thing that is starting to crystallize for me, and it's a question that I'm talking a lot about with advertisers, is a bit of a correction needed in the way that we think about the media mix. So there's been quite a lot of research recently, some of which we've contributed to the industry, which would suggest that maybe we have, as an industry, gone beyond the point of diminishing returns in terms of investment in kind of more one-to-one digital. I hate using the word digital, because what is digital nowadays? Everything is digital. But, more one-to-one display and social, I think, are the channels that perhaps we've probably gone a little bit past the diminishing returns point on. And I think that there's been this really, really strong narrative of decline around TV, but I think that has also had a sort of rub-off effect on some other media that I hate to use the term traditional, because again, like, what is traditional? But there's been this sort of narrative of like the money has to go in one direction, and that is like that's just going to keep happening in perpetuity. And I think for large brands, some of the evidence that's been produced recently gives kind of a moment to sort of pause and say, well, maybe we do need to look at our investment mix and rebalance a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, what is it? Is it in the Media Leader? I think talking about the fact of you're spending, I think it was three times as much as social as should be.
We, Group M, produced a study alongside Ubiquity for, it was commissioned by ThinkBox, but it was really for the industry. Yeah. And it's, ThinkBox have had nothing to do with any of the numbers in the study. It's a data set of £1.8 billion of UK advertising spend from 2022 and mainly 2023. All of it has been econometrically assessed by the brands who contributed data to the data set. It's over 140 brands. And when you build a meta-analysis of all those econometric debriefs looking at incremental revenue driven by advertising, you can build a set of essentially diminishing returns curves for channels like TV, out of home, cinema, display, social search, etc., etc. And you can build those curves for each individual category, and then you can optimize all the spend in the database to those curves. And what we find when we do that optimization exercise is that consistently across categories, and no matter what time frame you're looking for payback in, short, medium, or reasonably long 3-year payback horizon, consistently, the econometric data is saying the current media spend mix is too over-invested into display and social by an average factor of 2 to 3x, and under-invested in what I would characterise where we're under-investing as, it's high stature, one-to-many media.
I mean, it's an interesting point, and here's my take on things. And you've got to realise I'm not a advertising practitioner or so forth. I'm looking at it from the, from the outside. Yeah, some people might say, what sort of whether that's the right thing to do or not. But what strikes me is that we have a market such as the UK, which is 70% plus digital. Yeah, in terms of advertising.
Yeah. I mean, I would struggle to think of a media buy that I could do that I would describe as wholly analog or linear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So entirely digital. We've had the message now for 15 years that essentially what should happen with digital advertising is it's a lot more effective, it's a lot more efficient, it's more targeted, it should lead to greater sales, and that we have, the claim is that we have the data to prove that and the evidence to prove that, so on. And yet, if I step back and look at the wider macro data, both in terms of what consumers spend as a whole across the country, there's not been any acceleration.
Not really.
In terms of spending more. In fact, what you could argue is some of the data suggests there's maybe been a deflation in terms of particular categories, in terms of how much consumers spend. You look at companies, in terms consumer-facing companies, there's not been a marked acceleration in terms of their top-line growth from what they've done. And in fact, the only thing that you can point to in terms of saying that there has been a marked increase in terms of top-line growth was over the past 2 years when it comes to the inflationary effect of price increases being pushed through to consumers, where firms will talk about that it is essentially the strength of the brand that enabled them to do so.
Yeah.
Which is not really sort
yeah,
of the strength
that's definitely,
of digital
that
marketing.
was 100% a trend in the earnings calls through the last few years. Yeah, strength of brand versus price.
I'm struggling to see, we're supposed to have a product that is really supposed to maximize efficiency, drive sales, really accelerate things. There is no evidence whatsoever when look at what's happening on the wider consumer macroeconomic or indeed the company data to suggest that what is happening.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting provocation, and we've talked about this. I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to look at as many studies as I can of efficacy for advertising that's, in the moment in the industry. And there's been a lot of recent, really interesting research that kind of points the same way our econometric meta-analysis and optimization points. So the work of all the people in attention around linking, media that captures your eyeballs and allows you to capture the whole of the message in one go. That's been very, very strongly linked to positive business outcomes. But those measures aren't particularly favourable when you look across media towards digital media. This macroeconomic argument is absolutely true. Like we've looked at the data, we've talked about this. It's very difficult to see. Now the problem is when you zoom out to the macroeconomic level, is obviously there's so many factors at play. Yeah. And advertising is a weak force across the whole population, felt very, very in very, very small quantities. But I definitely think that it's something that if you're sort of saying, well, the status quo is the status quo, and it's good for everybody. It's good for business, and more and more money should just flow towards these sort of monolithic digital platforms. I think that we definitely need to sort of have a look at this macroeconomic case and say, well, if that's true, then why are we not seeing more evidence here? And I think that sometimes my frustration with with advertising as a whole is that we sort of get trapped in quite a myopic way of thinking, and I think this like digital good, traditional dying way of thinking about the media landscape has become so embedded and so often repeated that for many people that's just like, well, that's what it is, isn't it? And also, we're now far enough into the digital revolution that you've got a lot of people working in the industry who, owe their careers to the rise of digital platforms, and therefore, emotionally very sort of invested in the success of those platforms. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I was always a massive advocate for SEO because that's where I started out. So I recognise that, but I do think that it's important that we all take, especially in agencies, because it's our job to be objective about the media landscape and to try and be as neutral as possible. And I do think that this provocation around, if it's so much more effective, why can't we see it in macroeconomic numbers? I think it's a really good provocation of something that we need to spend more time looking at. But I think the good thing that comes out of the work that we've done recently around econometric analysis of advertising is that we didn't find a single channel that didn't pay back to businesses.
Which is a positive.
So in terms of return on investment, short term of like a few weeks, medium term of 6 to 12 months, and long term of 1 year to 3 years, the payback kept going up across the board for all media. For the media mix generally, the payback got stronger over time, and we didn't find channels that weren't paying back. It's just, are we investing? Have we gone beyond the point of diminishing returns in some channels? I think is the key question. Not does this stuff work? I mean, the study shows emphatically that advertising generally does work. Yes.
Yeah.
I think another pressure that's on marketing departments at the moment is the importance of technology and then the weight of technology in the marketing departments, the weight of MarTech in the budget. So one thing that I've seen recently, there's some really interesting data that comes out of something called the CMO survey.
Right.
And in that survey, brands were asked about the percentage of their total marketing budget that would be going on MarTech and of ad tech as a subset of MarTech. And that was increasing significantly over the next 3 years. I think the stat that I saw in the CMO survey was that it was currently at about 19% of marketing budget and was expected to go up to 40%.
Okay.
But at the same time, in the same survey, brands were asked sort of what percentage of your company's revenue does your marketing budget represent? And that was flat, slightly down. And then we've already sort of talked about how like revenue generally maybe for a lot of companies on a like-for-like basis is relatively flat. So the conclusion that I get to from that is that the money that's left over for communicating what your brand has to offer to consumers is being squeezed quite significantly by that increase in tech fees. But what I found really interesting was that the very next question in the survey was, if we gave you an extra £1 million as a CMO, just out of nowhere, what would you spend it on? And people and training was number one, very laudable, that's good to see. But then the second two things were essentially more money to advertise, so more money for paid media and more money for developing creative. The thing that came last of all, like bottom of the pile for where people would spend an extra £1 million if they had the money, was marketing technology.
Yeah.
Which says something like that's really interesting to me, because that kind of says that people are investing in marketing technology and growing their investment in marketing technology, but maybe with very little enthusiasm. Because if you gave them
to do it.
If they, and so maybe, and again that perhaps comes around to this idea of like sometimes a dominant narrative sets in, and the narrative is there, you know, and people work to the narrative, and maybe there's not as much questioning of the narrative as there could be. So that I found that interesting.
You mentioned before about sort of in terms of the agencies, what the agencies are doing in this environment. So given all of that, given what we talked, you know, just to go back before about the advertising environment at the moment and what you found in terms of digital, in terms of the amount that's been spent and the findings from the study, I guess, what are you doing at EssenceMediacom to help your clients through what's happening?
Well, out the back of the study that we've done, we've produced a tool which is like freely available to everybody, where you can go and very quickly describe your business size, your advertising budget, your appetite for risk in your advertising investment. And the tool will give you, based off of this £1.8 billion worth of media that's been spent in the market in the last 2 years, and based off all of the econometric learning that's come out of that, it will give you not only an optimized media mix, but also a set of numbers for how that ought to pay back over 3 years. So short run and 3 year return in terms of, and that can be revenue, or if you're willing to share your profit margin with the tool, it will also give you a profit ROI. And I think that that's a really strong contribution that Group M's made to the industry, because we're sort of allowing anybody anywhere the opportunity to build a really robust business case for advertising at the, you know, and it takes literally 30 seconds to do that. So I would encourage people to take a look at that. You can also, you know, if you're a business that isn't able to advertise in certain environments for whatever reason, you can also, you know, tweak your media. You can tell the tool that, look, I can't advertise in these places, so re-optimize for me. I think that's something that we're doing, and that enables us to help smaller to medium-sized clients who maybe don't invest in econometric analysis, or don't invest in econometric analysis particularly regularly, to make a really strong case for advertising, and also to calibrate their own learnings, because obviously their modelling is focused on a very, very small portion of total investment. So it's a great calibration point. Another thing that we're doing is we're doing a load of research around media quality. So media value, and you know, my job is to try and give brands a point of view on media value through the lens of their business. Media value is made up of the price of the media, the reach of the media, and then the quality of the media. Now we've got currencies for price and reach, but we don't have very many currencies for quality. The attention industry, people like Professor Karen Nelson-Fields, Mike at Lumen, and others are doing a really good job of building out a set of numbers around attention and showing how that can be used to think about media quality. It's a great body of work. The interesting thing that we're focused on is that we think that a lot of advertising impact happens subconsciously, and understanding where people's eyeballs are pointed is one thing, but it doesn't get you to that subconscious impact of media.
Yeah.
So I've been working with a company called, they were called Burst Your Bubble, they're now called Everyday People, headed up by Andrew Tenzer and Ian Murray. And we did some experiments using behavioural science techniques to understand if you're a brand that no one's ever heard of before, so you're a fake brand, and we don't show you any creative, we don't show you the advertising at all. Like you have to imagine what the advertising looks like. But we tell you, this brand's only going to advertise in out of home, or only going to advertise in telly, or only going to advertise in cinema, or only going to advertise in social, or only going to advertise through influencers. You know, bearing that in mind, here's all the questions about that company.
Yeah.
You know, how financially strong do you think they are? How widely known about do you think they are? You know, how much would you trust them to follow through on the promises that they're advertising? And what we've found is that there's really significant difference between the respondent cells based on which media we told them the brand was advertising in.
Okay.
And we call this signaling strength, which is sort of the research methodology. Ian and Andrew developed the research methodology out of the theory of costly signaling, which is kind of what advertising is. Right? It's like peacocking, isn't it, really, as a company? And that was really fascinating because what we found was that the sort of pattern of signal strength across media channels tended to hold up no matter what age the respondents were, which is, you know, because a lot of people will probably say, you know, younger people probably put a lot more stock in social. Yeah. The interesting thing is that, no matter what age the respondents were, it was the broadcast, more one-to-many channels that communicated this kind of, it's a strong brand, and you ought to sort of think of it as being a brand that's robust and confident and well known about and popular. The other interesting thing about the study is obviously that we weren't using traditional brand metrics. Those things I've just talked about, those attributes, are not like awareness and consideration. And I think often awareness and consideration aren't very well understood outside the marketing department. Sometimes not very well understood inside the marketing department. And so by using these metrics that are much more easy to sort of understand, I think we've developed a business case for doing brand building advertising that people who aren't in the marketing department can go, well, I'd like a bit of that for my company. I can totally see how having that for my company, those attributes, is a positive thing. And now what we're doing is we're drilling down further. So that's kind of big insight that came out of the study that we did with Everyday People was, it's really people's perception of the cost of the advertising that drives the brand building potential of the media. And so now we're able to drill a little further down into individual channels. So what we think we've developed is this sort of currency for quality in media that's built out of the way people subconsciously process the media, as opposed to the way that they physically absorb it through their eyeballs or through their ears, which is more the sort of area of the attention industry. So that's what we're working on.
Okay, and that common currency, if that happens, sort of presumably will be a major thing, because if think about the issues at the moment that people have in terms of the industry, there's definitely an issue in terms of I guess, quality of data, you know, also as well how that data's interpreted, you know, modeling that goes behind that and so forth. But one of the big questions, well, maybe you could talk about the issues, you know, some of the other issues that you see, and then talk about also as well, you know, to me, the importance of having the common currency is extremely significant. Yeah.
So, I mean, what we're hoping is that we'll be able to use this data to factor reach curves, essentially.
Right.
And we'll be able to have an impactful reach curve instead of just a reach curve, because we all know that 1 point of reach in one channel is not the same as 1 point of reach in another channel. And that's the bit of the equation that we're focusing on. The thing that I like about this research is that it is quite easy to understand, and there's no really complicated modelling behind it. I think when it comes to marketing effectiveness, there's always it's time, cost, and then credibility.
Yeah.
That's the three things you're balancing. Yeah. So something like MMM, highly credible, clearly, although I think it's very important that you have an open discussion about the assumptions that are built into your model. And you know, in your world, people won't ask, what does the model tell me? They'll say, what are the assumptions that sit behind the model? And that's what they're in. And I think we need to do much more of that in the marketing world of not focusing so much on what the numbers are that are coming out of the model, but talking about what assumptions are built into the models. The second thing is, cost, obviously, econometrics, it's a higher end solution in terms of effectiveness than this research is much quicker and faster, and we can look at all sorts of formats that don't even exist yet. We can put into the research and get a read on how people will perceive them in terms of their brand building potential. And then in terms of credibility, I think sometimes people who aren't kind of au fait with modelling and really clear on it can sort of struggle to sort of see the linkage between the investment and the sales, and there's still a lot of questions that you have to get clients over. And then it's even worse when you get into attribution data, because you've got attribution data and you're trying to chat a client to attribution data, they've clearly got like a lot of very big and obvious questions about, is there duplication in here across channels, and what's the window on this attribution and all that sort of stuff. So whereas this methodology that we've developed, I feel it kind of definitely delivers on the cost and speed side of it, and whilst it may not be sort of as robust as something like a modelling exercise, it is easy to understand, and the metrics that we're talking about are ones that I think anybody who works in a business would say, we want that for our brand,
and are credible as well.
Yeah,
which, as you say, is
absolutely
critical.
But I think this thing of adjusting reach for quality, Karen Nelson-Field's written a lot about it from the attention point of view, and I think I'm trying to do it as well from this more sort of subconscious processing point of view. I think that is where we can deliver real commercial advantage for brands, because the currencies for reach and price are kind of set by the industry, and there's no real escaping them. Obviously, price is a function of your negotiating skill, which is a whole other part of the advertising world. But on the quality front, it feels like that's where there's this like wide open space to offer commercial advantage.
So we've talked about digital currency, that potentially the common currency, that could be a game changer. Could you walk us through some of the other partnerships and relationships that you've got at the moment?
Yeah,
and what you're doing there.
So one thing that we're hoping to do with this quality currency is work alongside our media partners to explore in a bit more detail the various formats that are available within each channel, because brands, I think of a lot of brands through their effectiveness programs have a very sophisticated way of getting to a channel mix recommendation, and you can use tools like the Media Mix Navigator from Profitability to help you calibrate that mix. But if you're going to invest £3 million into out-of-home this year, out-of-home's a big place, right? There's a lot of out-of-home inventory, and where are you going to spend that £3 million in out-of-home? Because that's a really important question that will affect the effectiveness of your overall campaign. And so we're working with media partners to look at all of the most popular formats in the channels, in the individual channels, and then understand consumers' perception of price for those formats. And then obviously we can compare that to actual price, and then bring reach into the equation. All of a sudden we're able to like map out where potentially there is value in the market for brands, and different types of value. So very, very high stature, what consumers think is very, very high stature, powerful brand building media, versus potentially underpriced, slightly lower stature media, but that's got much more reach on it. There's different forms of value there for different types of brands. So we're looking to do that across a number of channels at the moment with various partners, and that will help us build up this database of this currency of quality right at the format level, but across lots and lots of different channels. So I find it quite exciting, and hopefully it will provide a database upon which we can build really significant commercial advantage for brands looking to improve the strength of their brand.
It's going to be interesting times.
Yeah, it's good. And the other thing, just to sort of like circle it back, is when we do this research, again, what it points to is broadcast channels, many channels, are potentially underinvested in, and we may be slightly overinvested in channels that are sort of from a brand building potential anyway, sort of slightly less powerful.
Yeah.
Which is kind of corroborates what we found from the profitability study, corroborates things like the recent work that Peter Field's been touring around the industry as well, and also the attention vendors. We're all kind of pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Which I think is rare.
Yeah.
It's rare that you see like a lot of evidence all pointing in one direction.
Yeah. Just want to end, and I think a lot of this we've touched on already, but I guess it's just a synopsis of the whole thing. If you're advising somebody in brand, sort of who wants to build up their brand today, what do you think are the most effective things that they can do?
I mean, I'll come at that question from a very advertising point of view,
Of
obviously,
course.
because I think there's. I think it's really interesting at the moment that there's, what the internet does is essentially it encourages consumers to assess products and brands on a much more rational basis. It encourages people to go and look at reviews, price points, pros and cons and functionality comparisons and stuff like that. In many ways, like the internet kind of erodes the power of a brand. So I would say that, when we speak to brands, a lot of the time we talk about, well, what can we be doing in terms of developing the experience around your product and the ownership experience or the buying experience to make it better. And I think that, even as an advertising person, that is phenomenally important. And I'd always say sort of focus on that. But from an advertising point of view, I think it's important that for brands of all sizes, they're imbuing their brand with a sense of stature. And they're using media. That's what media can do for a brand, is give it that sense of like, this is a big thing, or this is this is a really popular thing that's at the heart of the nation's culture right now. It's like it is, and media in particular. When we say the media is the message for a reason.
Yeah.
Like media can do that, but the important thing is not to think of media as like something that works in a week. You're investing in media because you're building kind of intangible value for your business.
Yeah.
And if the media is the message, then, that message doesn't, because it can often be so broad, you're not going to see that come back straight away. So if you're going to sort of think about building your brand in quite a sophisticated way, then you need quite a sophisticated set of measures to show that that's happening.
And it needs to be consistent.
Yeah. And
rather than chop and change.
100%, is that it needs to be something that you're in for the long haul and that you're sort of here to build over time, I guess. All that sort of stuff. That's very basic advice, isn't it? But the thing that I would be saying is, I think that we can navigate you to commercial advantage in that space by thinking about media value in different ways.
Right.
And there is commercial advantage to be had out there. You can get to a position where you can see value in the landscape that the people selling the media to you maybe are unaware of, or that your competitor brands definitely haven't seen. And that's kind of what I'm in. That's what I'm here to do for brands, and that's what I would probably end up talking to them about once I've got through my usual waffle.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Yeah, not at all. It's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, superb. It's been fascinating to hear about the work you're doing to develop a currency for quality and how this currency will help brands maximize their brand building potential whilst delivering on other key business goals. If there's anything you would like to ask us or hear more about, you can visit the JCDecaux Marketing Hub online. We hope you enjoyed listening. And wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.